One of the many things that came to light as a result of the war in Gaza is the indisputable ties between the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees, UNRWA, and the Hamas terror group. Repeatedly, members of Hamas have been found to be employees of the UN agency, in some cases, even teachers. Now the Israeli Knesset is pushing back with a bill to designate UNRWA as a terror group. Joining us to discuss this bill and the role of UNRWA in general is Israeli member of Knesset, Sharren Haskel. Sharren, pleasure to have you on the show, as always. What can you tell us about this bill in the Knesset, which will designate UNRWA as a terror group? And what would this bill do, practically speaking?
So the main goal, there's a few bills that were passed and they're meant to be joined together. And the main goal is to disconnect the ties between Israel and UNRWA. UNRWA is this organization that sits at the heart of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. If we don't make major changes, reform, or close our ties with them, what happens on the 7th of October, the reality of Israelis and Palestinians, is bound to happen over and over again every few years. UNRWA has a radical Islamist education system that's been radicalizing generations of Gazan and Palestinians, pushing them towards terrorist activities. They have school camps of Hamas funded by UNRWA where they teach literally babies 3 years old, 4 years old, how to stab. How can that be funded from the international community, from the United Nations contributions? And beside that, what we've experienced on the 7th of October by UNRWA's employees, it shouldn't come to a surprise to anyone who knows this organization. There are more than 100 employees that we know that have participated on the 7th of October massacre. And if we take the list of employees and the list of the activists of Hamas, I'm absolutely certain that 70% of the employees in Gaza are either Hamas or their first family members. This is not a United Nations organization. This is not a neutral organization. The United Nations organization are bound legally to work on the principle of neutrality. You cannot tell me that this organization is like that. So better late than never, but we are passing now a legislation that will force the hand of Israel not to continue its ties with UNRWA.
Now, these set of bills that you mentioned, I mean, practically speaking, what will the impact be if we still see international donors pouring money into this agency that's inherently corrupt and, in a way, self-contradictory itself as its mission?
So, first of all, it will create a lot of challenges because, look, Israel is the one that's supplying electricity, for example, for the Gazan citizens. Israel's the one that's supplying water to Gazan citizens, okay? All the goods and the products, you know how Gaza has a border with Egypt? All the goods to build Gaza, to bring, commercial and food and everything, it comes, most of it, from the Israeli border, okay? It means that if UNRWA is trying to communicate or trying to pass its own goods or anything like that, which we know is Hamas, we know these goods are ending up in the hands of Hamas for their own political gain, because through that, they are still controlling the population. The humanitarian aid doesn't go to the poor Palestinians. It goes first to Hamas. They're selling it in the market to pocket that money. So with creating most of these challenges on the communication or the cooperation between UNRWA and Israel, it will create many, many difficulties for these organizations. It means that they're going to have to go through a serious, build-up of infrastructure, etc., which is almost incapable of being built because we know most of the funds, most of the money, most of the equipment that come is being sold by Hamas later on in the international market or the local market, which means it's not going to go anywhere. So it's really putting a serious barrier.
Now, we are almost out of time, but I wanted to ask you about UNRWA more generally. What is this organization's objective, and why do we continue to see this collusion with terrorists? I mean, you mentioned 100 members of Hamas took part in the October 7th massacre, are employees of UNRWA. How is this happening?
So UNRWA is not a refugee organization. That's the greatest mistake that everyone does. I mean, look on the UNHCR. That's a real refugee organization. Their goal are either to resettle, okay, the refugees back into the origin, back into their homes or to the lands around their country, or to absorb them in other countries and basically find a better life for them. Like Germany accepted almost 1 million Syrian refugees, and Belgium and France and many other countries. That's the goal of UNHCR. These are the goals of a normal refugee organization. UNRWA is the exact opposite. Okay, UNRWA hasn't resettled or absorbed a single Palestinian refugee. On the contrary, on a contrast to the regular refugee definition of someone who's being displaced or persecuted is being considered a refugee, UNRWA's definition is inheritable. It means that even if your great-great-great-grandfather was a refugee, you still inherit whether you were displaced or not, whether you're poor or a millionaire, whether you even have a German citizenship, you are still being considered a refugee because it's profitable. They made this refugee status a social package that is profitable for them to hold.
Sharren, I'm sorry to cut you off. I think it's actually really important information exposing how much of a scam this organization is, but we are actually out of time for today. So I want to thank you for joining us and shedding some insight on this important development in legislation in Israel. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Emily.